Howdy. This is the Fight Site MMA Podcast. I didn't know what I was going to say before I started that sentence, but I found it. I'm Ed Gallo. I'm joined by Sriram Raleigh, whose name I butchered last week for the first time. I haven't stopped thinking about it, and I'm so sorry.
It's fine. I'm good. This was an interesting week, and we have another interesting one ahead of us. So lots of stuff to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Important things, maybe not the most things, but important.
Yeah. Shout out to our patrons who have given us a decent amount of requests to do, like on the podcast, or questions and other topics to discuss. We're waiting for an off week. Listen, before every podcast, we're like, okay, what is there to discuss? And we're like, oh, that won't take too long. And then we do it, and it's like an hour and a half. And we're like, this can't be any longer. So thank you for your patience. And for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, the Fight Site's on Patreon. That is how we make money. $3 gets you in, and that gives you access to all of our exclusive content, which there is a lot of. So if you think we're just like a podcast or whatever, think again. And beyond that,
You're an idiot.
Yeah, $5 gets you into our Discord server, which is turning out to be a pretty big community. There's almost 200 people in there, I think, and it's pretty active. And there's lots of different discussions going on at once, and I'm pretty happy with it right now. So get in there. Come hang out with us if you're an MMA fan who is knowledgeable, wants to talk to other knowledgeable fans, or a fan of other combat sports who wants to do that, or you would like to become knowledgeable about combat sports or just be surrounded by people who are. It's a good place to be. So there's my ad read. But yeah, we'll get to your requests soon, guys. I'm sorry. I'm not that sorry. I'm busy, but yeah.
We're gonna get to it within the month because there's not a whole lot of things. This is like the UFC has tended to put a bunch of good fights on the pay-per-view and just completely neglect the fight nights
the
last couple months. So we should have some off weeks to handle whatever you ask. And for new people, the MMA podcast at least tends to be somewhat prompt. So if you ask us, we'll get to it.
My life is so content centric that when I see a card that sucks coming up, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't really have to talk about that. And I get excited. I was rooting for the Olympics to be canceled because I didn't want to write about it. I was like, so that's where my mind's at right now. But the Olympics were not canceled, and men's freestyle is literally about to start in 2 minutes. So if you see my eyes darting around, it's not because I have ADHD, but I do. But that's not why. Anyway, let's talk about mixed martial arts. So in terms of results, there was the UFC card last week, and there was the Bellator card last week. The Bellator card was infinitely better, but the UFC card did have a lot of finishes, and people like that. But in terms of fights that matter divisionally, the main event's probably the only one worth talking about. So Sean Strickland beat up Uriah Hall. I watched it. You watched it. How did you feel about Strickland's performance? Did we learn anything new, or was that just kind of how that fight was supposed to go?
Yeah, I think that was pretty much just classic Strickland and classic Hall for that matter. We saw Hall kind of try to be a bit urgent. The thing about Strickland is, if you give him space to be smart, he's going to be relatively smart about the things that he's doing. We saw in from the first second of the Hall fight, right? He was getting behind his shoulder really proactively to guard against Hall's singular counter that he does once a round sometimes, which is he kind of cross counters people. Kind of just times guys stepping into him with a short right hand. That's how he dropped Paulo Costa. And Strickland seemed very specifically prepared for that off his own jab. But when Hall kind of stepped forward and tried to do more things, Strickland didn't look all that defensively, which isn't surprising. The real difference really was that Strickland kind of adapted and dealt with the things Hall was doing specifically. When Hall started jabbing with him, for instance, he started jabbing to draw the jab and going to the slipping to the inside and coming over with his own right hand, which is, I think, what hurt Hall in the third. And one time, actually, Hall tried to body jab, and he did that a couple times in succession. And Strickland switch kicked him to the head as he did it, which is you don't tend to see guys actually make reads like that in real time super often at middleweight. I get why people don't like Strickland. He's an ugly fighter, and he seems like a kind of ugly person.
He's definitely both of those things.
But I think he's the sort of fighter that I think you need for middleweight to be a normal division. For a long time, we've been decrying that middleweight is kind of barren past about 3, 4, 5 people. There's nobody. And I'd rather see fighters be a lot more flawed in terms of normal things, defense, punching form, than guys like Ian Heinisch who are just capable of nothing. So yeah, I think Strickland's fine. Uriah Hall, normal Uriah Hall isms. we saw that his jab is significantly less versatile than people gave it credit for. He was able to jab with Strickland and land, but nothing super consistent. And, obviously he needs like big Hail Mary things to really get anything done and have any confidence in a fight. By the end of the fight, Strickland was just like doing a lot of punch and clutch things, swarming Hall against the fence. And yeah, I mean, Strickland seems fun. He's apparently been he's been approached to fight Luke Rockhold, which could be fun.
Yeah.
Since Rockhold is now old, so that fight's
competitive. And they're waiting for someone to kick Strickland. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. That would not. It might not be fun for Strickland now. It would definitely not be fun for Strickland in like 2016.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I wouldn't say I'm excited for him. I support the existence of a Sean Strickland fighter at middleweight.
That's a very measured evaluation. It was like within the first round. I mean, Uriah Hall is not really a fighter known for his conditioning. He doesn't like fall apart, but he's stronger earlier. Depending on the pacing of the fight.
And he works in moments.
Yeah. And I think he set himself up for failure, honestly, just the way he was trying to box with Sean Strickland. He's used to being the longer guy. And, considering how tough the matchup seemed to be inherently, I thought he was doing a decent job trying to box with him. Just, it was a really tall order, and he didn't really have the depth to do that. He's not like good at getting inside people's range, because how often does he have to do that? He's used to keeping people on the end. I think he switched to Fortis MMA, so he looked like he picked up some skills. As a boxer, he looked better than he has in other fights. But changing your skill set for one opponent is pretty crazy. I don't know if that's what he was doing, but he's like very kick heavy usually, or at least in his good performances he has been. And maybe like once in the first couple rounds, he timed Strickland stepping in and low kicked him, and it landed really hard, and he just was really reluctant to kick with him. And it was just like, whatever concerns you have about why you're not kicking, it's better just to use your tools, especially when that's the best part of your game, is that you're a really powerful kicker. You have a really good diversity of kicks. You can do this. And he did not try very much to do that. And by the time he did start being like, okay, maybe I got to kick, he was already a bit broken down. And that's one aspect of the commentary that was very strange to me. Bisping said he trained with both of them. And I remember at one point, Uriah Hall, blew up at Bisping on Twitter. So I think they had beef. And Bisping was like, he's broken, like pretty early in the fight. And I was like, yeah, maybe, but he's like hanging tough and still trying to do stuff and trying to win. And like, there was plenty of situations where he could have quit and he didn't. He kept trying to land. And it's like, yeah, he was like broken from like, can't really hold himself together too much anymore at this point. And Strickland's just kicking his ass. But he wasn't not trying, and he didn't fold. So I'm just like, you seem to have some information there, Bisping, that you're working with, or maybe you don't like him. I don't know. It was a little weird. It was a little awkward. And Bisping was also like standing Strickland during the fight. He got really excited at one point because he thought Strickland was coaching Uriah Hall and like yelling at him during the fight and talking to him. That. Turned out it was Uriah Hall's corner. They corrected him and he felt awkward. That part was weird. But I mean, the fight was fine. It was a good performance from Strickland, but as like a main event of a UFC card is like, what are we doing? But yeah, that's really the only fight from that card I'm interested in talking about. I don't know if you had anything else you want to talk about from that card.
Nothing else on the card. Just like a final note on the fight, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing with Hall is he's it seems like he's been coached into jabbing without really understanding why he's doing it, if that makes sense. A lot of the praise he got for the Costa fight, and I think the ACJ fight, was that he, jabbed them a lot, but he doesn't really like use it to set up other opportunities the way Strickland does. And I think it kind of goes the same way with the kicks, right? Like a lot of what Hall did, he's been kick heavy in that his finishes have a lot of kicks, but it's not the sort of thing where you've seen him consistently figure out triggers for the kicks and like break guys down with them and really, and anything he does, Uriah Hall is insanely like he needs moments. He needs moments more than he needs consistency. That's what made this such. I mentioned before the fight. This was the most middleweight fight there is, because you have one fighter who's just pure consistency at the cost of form. You have another fighter who's pure form at the cost of consistency. And as it turns out, consistency wins. So yeah, I mean, fun from Strickland. Hall back to the drawing board, I guess. I don't know what he does at the drawing board, but
fights worse people, I think, would be a good thing to do. Because I kind of like where his skills are at the moment. He just needs to figure out what his deal is. I was going to make a reference. If anyone's seen, I think you should leave. Yeah, Chunky. What's Chunky's deal? We got to figure out what Chunky's deal is. We got to figure out what Uriah's deal is. Like he's got these skills. He's got stuff. He's got a lot of stuff. He can be better. He can be better than he is without learning new things. He just needs to have better ideas about how he's going to apply what he has. And I don't think Fortis is the right camp because Jeff Neal recently looked a bit short on the ideas side. Carlos Diego Ferreira also kind of looked like he ran out of ideas in terms of striking. So I don't know if that's the right camp. I mean, he's developing his fundamentals, but I don't think that was entirely the problem. I think it's middleweight. He could be beating people more than he is. So I'm not sure, but I'm not that concerned about it. But it would be cool for him to succeed because he's a very talented fighter. He can do a lot. And he's physically, he doesn't look like he's only got a little bit of time left. Yeah, I think he could put a little something together, but it would just be cool to see him like finally break through and be like a legit contender because I think he's always had it in him. And the hype was overblown for a long time. And he had bigger holes in his game back then. I think he deserves that hype a little bit more now. But it's just like he's fighting better people. So it's like he's not looking as impressive, but I don't know. I'm cool with Uriah Hall. I wish he was better though.
I mean, you could see him trying, but yeah, I agree with Fortis. I think like a while ago, we thought they were like a really good sort of hipstery camp because they created fighters that we really liked who weren't necessarily super high in the ranks. But then CDF got old after like one really great performance, and Jeff Neal looked a lot more limited than we expected him to be. So yeah, I mean, I think it's very possible Hall's reached his limit at Fortis because those guys they're genuinely good boxers in terms of like moment to moment things. But a lot of them don't seem to really have an idea of what they're doing in the larger scale of fighting. So, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I'm not really sure Hall deserves a ton of hype just because he's, if he hasn't hit his ceiling yet, he turned 37 on the day of the fight. Mm-hmm. He's probably going to hit it soonish. But, yeah, I mean, I'd be fine with him getting a Gastelum rematch or something.
Gastelum rematch. Interesting. Anyway, so that was that card. The best event from last week was Bellator 263. Main event was Patricio Pitbull versus AJ McKee. We talked about how great and good Pitbull has been throughout his career and how impressed we've been with him and how AJ McKee, hasn't blown us away with his past performances, but looked like, a good fighter with a lot of potential, definitely physical. And he finished Pitbull in under 2 minutes. He rocked him with a head kick and then he dropped him in an ensuing flurry. And then he picked up a standing guillotine. With regard to the stoppage, I think the ref made a decision too early, but I do think that Pitbull was out. I just feel like he reached to grab his arm or saw the arm go down and it was went to stop it right away. It was grabbing the arm. I think you got to give it a dangle. A couple seconds aren't that much of a big deal when it comes to chokes. If they just went out, you'll be okay. Better safe than sorry, but with submissions, it's a little different when it comes to chokes, but I don't know. With regard to the performance, some stuff that I noticed, we talked about the cross counters and how the boxing exchanges would be pretty messy for AJ McKee. He simply did not have any.
He simply
did not box with him at all. And I was like, oh, this is actually pretty intelligent. I think that's a good amount of awareness that he used the longest weapon he had, which was the side kick to the leg, which you actually lean back on. It creates a lot of distance. Their counters and defense exist to it, but that's not really within Pitbull's game too much. And he kept mixing up his side kick with regular low kicks to the outside of the leg. And Pitbull was reaching for them. And I was, because you weren't on the commentary with me, Sriram, so I was commentating by myself, having to make all these striking reads by myself. I'm like, well, when people start reaching for the low kicks, usually they kick high next. And he did, but it wasn't really off the same motion of the low kicks before. But conceptually it made sense. But I think it was actually just he drew the hand fight and kicked high. Got him reaching and parrying. Because, he's such a good counter puncher. He's always looking for counter punching. And sometimes you can trick people into boxing and kick them. Kind kind of similar to that early dynamic with like Randy Costa and Adrian Yanez, but better. But I'm wondering how the game plan would have developed over time and what Pitbull would have done and what the fight would have looked like if it was longer. But I mean, he did exactly what he was trying to do, and it worked immediately. And with regard to like being shot or not, I don't think there's
hard to say.
There's nothing you can take from that fight to be like, oh, Pitbull's declined. He got kicked in the head, and he didn't like get knocked out. He just got hurt by getting kicked in the head. That's normal. That's how normal people react. He got dropped in the follow-up for it, but he was rocked with a head kick. So I don't know. There's not too much you can take away from it other than AJ McKee, pretty smart. You know what I mean? Like he's succeeded in every attempt to win a fight he's had so far, even though he's shown flaws in other fights. Now we know he's a guy that when he comes
understands fights.
Yeah. When he's fighting someone that he has legitimate challenges for him, he knows what those are and he knows how to mitigate them. So he allegedly has one fight left on his contract in Bellator. So he's probably going to fight him again for the lightweight title.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good just because this fight wasn't A, super damaging, and B, I mean, it was conclusive, definitely, but we didn't see all the things we would have liked to see. But yeah, it was a kind of bizarre fight just because the finish, it looked like AJ McKee was playing a lot off the open side straight because the way that Pitbull reacted, he like brought his elbow way down and like parried and like leaned one way to like brace himself for the kick, and then the kick just didn't happen, or the straight rather, it just didn't happen. He just got kicked. So it was like a southpaw double attack without one of the parts of the attack, which was weird. But yeah, that happens. You know, sometimes it's just a gamble when a guy's that big and not really giving you a whole lot. So yeah, I mean, AJ McKee seems to understand what he's good at. He seems to understand the attributes that he has and how to use them. And yeah, this is a tremendous win. I mean, until we see Pitbull look worse, I don't think we can really say that this was a loss that is, you know, any sort of contingent on age. Like we said before the podcast, or before the event rather, he's had a long career. He's like, to be one of the greatest, you have to have a fairly long career with a good deal of mileage and that you're fighting good opponents. But he did not look declined in this tournament whatsoever. He looked very good. So you have to give AJ McKee full props for that. And I'm happy for him because, you know, super young fighter, millionaire now, I guess. I mean, it's tough to say because, you know, taxation, but as close to a millionaire as anyone in MMA is probably going to get in one fight. So
big Joey Davis, Joey Davis's dad, like a year or two ago, told me that like AJ McKee's contract that he signed was $1 million contract. So that doesn't mean like you're going to make $1 million per fight. And maybe he was just meant that he's in the tournament and he can win $1 million. But he might have meant that his payouts for the entirety of his contract would equal $1 million. Like how the UFC signs people to 6-figure contracts. For like a 7-figure contract, which is actually, you know, pretty good.
That's solid.
So I don't know. I think he is a millionaire. Pretty amazing. I mean, Antonio McKee also made a lot of really smart career decisions. I mean, he fought almost the entirety of his career outside of the UFC. And I think he was smart with his money and like bought property and opened a gym and like did all of this stuff. And now he's sitting pretty. He's well off. For sure. I've interviewed him before. I know this stuff. So, AJ McKee, I think I really want him to fight in the UFC because historically Bellator's featherweight division has been there's been some elite fighters that can show you a lot and a lot of tests to go around. But at the moment, like outside of like fighting Mads Burnell or like, that's it. Outside of fighting Mads Burnell or maybe some of these, like someone like Shabli, or you know, any of the other Russians coming up. I feel like there aren't as many cool tests for McKee as there were for Pitbull over time. So UFC sooner than later. So hopefully he finishes this contract and then goes to the UFC. But do they want to do that? Because here's a guy that could beat your guys. He's from Bellator. They've taken that risk before. It's worked out well for them. I mean, Eddie Alvarez won the freaking title, but not until after he lost to one of their guys. Yeah, it worked out both ways. Hector Lombard, kind of a bust. But again, he had a full career. All these guys had full careers before they came into the UFC, so them having success in the UFC is pretty amazing. Alvarez, Chandler, Lombard. I don't know, other people maybe, but so you know what I mean? It's like, this is the first time that they're going to get someone pretty much in their prime or close to it.
Fresh.
And it's like, this is going to reflect a lot on both companies. And, you know, for Bellator, it's like, they can talk about the UFC if they want. The UFC dare not mention Bellator. So if your guy comes over there and does well, you're going to talk about it. Kind of like how One Championship loves to bring over the UFC fighters and just set them up to get destroyed. And then when they do, like, oh my God, we're knocking out all the UFC fighters. But I don't know. I hope they do it. I haven't seen anything from him that would make me think like, oh yeah, he beat Volk, except that he's really big. He's really big. So that could always turn into something. It's just like, if you have that kind of skill set, if it's like even remotely a competitive matchup, just in terms of the way the skills align, and then you're bigger, that's definitely something. But yeah, I wouldn't really think of him as a challenge for Volk right now, but I'd throw him in among the top like 7 or 8 at featherweight or lightweight, whatever. And to see how it pans out, I'm interested for sure.
Yeah, I mean, big and young, I think I generally expect those people to move up sooner or later because he's huge and I don't know if he's yet to grow into his frame, so to speak, but it tends to get tougher to cut weight when you're older. So, yeah, I expect him to move up to lightweight, but at featherweight, I think he's interesting for pretty much everybody. Volk, I don't know, like, that's the thing with this fight is it's tough to say that he'd be able to compete because a lot of us were saying Pitbull was like a challenge for Volk in certain conceptual ways. I'm not really that sure McKee's shown the same sort of things, but being huge and kicky, that's something that I think could give Volk some trouble early. It's just that we need to see him compete in the sort of moment-to-moment adjustments that we've seen Volk make and Max make. As for the rest, I think he'd be trouble for Calvin Kattar just because he's big and kicky and southpaw. Ortega, I don't really have much of a read on at this point, so that's something.
That would be like a cool debut fight, honestly, him and Ortega, because, you know, the grappling matchup would be pretty interesting. I think McKee's actually a better grappler than Ortega.
And he said that Ortega's tapped him out, but a long time ago.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. But yeah, I think that'd be cool. But yeah, so hopefully something happens with that, or, you know, maybe they fast track Chablis and we get to see Chablis versus someone we consider elite.
That'd be cool.
After all. Him versus Pitbull would have been cooler though, but yeah, it's fine. Maybe we'll still get that too.
Maybe they do that first.
Yeah, exactly. Co-main event, Mads Burnell took out Emmanuel Sanchez. I was so impressed because I
tremendous fight.
I have respect for Emmanuel Sanchez. I think he's got a pretty good skill set. Ryan has respect for Emmanuel Sanchez, which means a lot more than me having respect for somebody because I'm more easily impressed than Ryan is. And Mads like neutralized his offense really well, got his counters through really well, hit that transitional game to his level changes, and he just looked phenomenal.
Yeah, I watched this fight. It was like the commentary was what annoyed most people because it was really bad. Honestly, most of the rounds were close except for I believe the third when Burnell just got on top and Sanchez didn't really do much to make the top control not matter. So the third round was Mads Burnell's round, but 1 and 2 were both incredibly close, and I think they easily could have gone to Mads Burnell. The 30-27 card I don't think was egregious, but yeah, it was a tremendous fight. I thought Emmanuel Sanchez did a really good job dealing with Mads Burnell's game in terms of, you know, high guardy pressure forward things. He did a lot of, you know, working around the high guard with the body work, the jab and hook change up, which I forgot to mention. Sean Strickland did that a lot against Uriah Hall too, so you know, couple of connections there, I guess. Sanchez watched the fight, but the jab and the left hook, lots of combination work. But I think he sort of settled into just hitting the high guard itself a bunch of times, and it worked as a scoring thing probably, just because the judges can't really see what connects.
Which is insane. Like you should be able to see if something hitting arms or face. Like you got it. That's what you're looking for, you know? Yeah.
I mean, it should be, but the judges are all flatted, and apparently the commentary is somehow even worse. But Mads Burnell looked like the tighter puncher in the pocket, which worked out very well. He was able to counterpunch him a lot. And he actually went to this sort of cross guard later in the fight when Sanchez started scoring, quote unquote, for those of you who are not on video. He started scoring for free on the high guard. When he started, just sort of rattling it off, he started going to that cross guard and hitting these really sweet left hooks off it, where, he'd go to the body or roll with the shot and left hook him to the head. So really smart performance from Mads Burnell, both in terms of that and in terms of finding his takedown entries. There was one really early one, I think it was in the first round, where like the way he'd crouch into his left hook, it looked exactly like the takedown. Even I couldn't see that one coming. So
you do it.
Terrific stuff from Mads Burnell. The fact that the UFC let him go, still a very real tragedy. I want to see him against the very best at featherweight, honestly. I think he's a really compelling challenge, but Arnold Allen, the best ever, perhaps.
Yeah, it totally depends on what they do with this McKee Pitbull situation. If they do another fight with them at lightweight, because if not, like that makes him the number one contender. Like that's the guy that just fought for the title, beat him pretty clearly. He's on the level. Like send him in. But yeah, we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I thought he looked great. I think he's been really owning the style, really refining it over time. It's perfect for MMA. It's really great. With him, it's like people who are really good straight hitters, who can work a high guard, who are more threatening to the body, who are more threatening with their kicking game. I think a lot of snap kicks to the body came to mind. But honestly, with the cross guard, like the parrying motion comes really naturally out of it. So straight kicking is not as natural a solution as you would think. But just normal high guard stuff should be an issue. But yeah, I mean, like he's in pocket exchanges, he'll duck out of them sometimes. They're just like little details here and there that like he's not perfect, but I mean, as far as a game goes, it's one of the best I've seen.
He has a good one.
Yeah, it's really, really smart. So love him to death. For both of those fights, you can listen to the commentary on podcast platforms under the Fight Site Podcast Network, which you're doing right now. Unfortunately, the videos are not on Patreon, so I recorded the commentaries like I always do. I got the Showtime free subscription, like the trial, to do it. And then I finished and I uploaded, I processed the videos. And then I went to look, and like Showtime had some sort of like screen recording protections, and it had the video screen. Everything else was still there. And my thing was still there. The video screen was black the whole time. So they're sneaky. They're good. They saw me coming. I get on that level, ESPN, UFC, your cybersecurity sucks.
Better yet, don't get on that level.
Yeah, or don't. But yeah, I wasn't able to grab the video from that, which was unfortunate. But you can still listen to my commentary, which was fine without Sriram. Wasn't great.
I'm sure
it was okay. But yeah, so coming up, UFC 265, I believe it's called, is headlined by the fake heavyweight title fight, like just insanely ridiculous.
Completely fake.
Like, I guess they had some negotiation bump with Ngannou, and they said, okay, we don't need you. Moving on. Here's a new title fight. Which is, I mean, like, when did he knock out Stipe? Like a few months ago?
Yeah, it was in March.
Yeah, come on, man. So obviously this is ridiculous, but it's, as far as heavyweight goes, it's exciting.
It's an okay fight.
It's exciting. Just because it's like, the guy that is like the heir to like being the good heavyweight, you know what I mean? Like technically good, has a lot of skills as a striker, is athletic. That was kind of the role that Stipe took. Although Stipe had a lot of the meatheadedness in him, whereas Gane is like very okay with being boring and picking his shots and being process oriented. And Derrick Lewis is the exact opposite of that. Just the definition of dumbing down your style, which is not really derogatory. It's like, I think at heavyweight, it makes a lot of sense to dumb down your style if you have the attributes to get it done. He makes a ton of mistakes in between. Don't get me wrong. And I don't think he would get away with those mistakes against certain people, but it's like very philosophically charged fight. You know what I mean? It's like, good versus evil. If you think, but Derrick Lewis is a cool guy and like everyone likes him and he's very funny. So I don't mean that. But yeah, it's just like in terms of analysts, it's like I think all the analysts want Gane to win just because Derrick Lewis being the heavyweight champ, while fitting,
a fake heavyweight champ.
Very fitting being the fake heavyweight champ. It's just it shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen.
I mean, I'm significantly more lukewarm on Gane. I think he kind of occupies a space where he doesn't lean enough into the heavyweight tropes to like be a good example of being good despite them, but he's not good enough to be a real inversion of those tropes. It's like if someone like Dan Ige were a heavyweight and you just watched him and you're like, hey, this guy is better than the other heavyweights, but you don't ever really look at him like a guy who's here to save heavyweight, if that makes sense. He's just kind of Dan Ige. Like, who cares about Dan Ige? Not a lot of people. All
right, sure. So, I'm going to stop you because I think people are listening. They're like, what are you talking about? Gane's not good enough. He's so perfect and amazing on his feet. What do you wish that Gane did on his feet to make his style more viable in your eyes?
I think it's a lot of like the way that people look at Leon Edwards. That's kind of how I look at Ciryl Gane at this point. Okay. A lot of what he does is like he doesn't really have the mechanics to be a very big hitter on the feet. He doesn't really have a lot of urgency to build on the ways that he's winning a fight. The Jairzinho Rosenstruck fight, I consider a way bigger indictment than a lot of people, because people consider that just like a fight IQ showcase thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like Rosenstruck did nothing and Gane did one thing, and he was okay with doing one thing so he wouldn't get countered. But if you're not willing to build on the ways that Rosenstruck is just insanely limited and not particularly good, I don't think that's a good sign against someone like even Derrick Lewis, right? Derrick Lewis is, if he loses the whole fight, he's going to figure out a way to kind of turn it around in some way or another, and just get at you and start making the fight ugly. So I don't think this is a fight that he loses. I guess that's a spoiler alert. I think Gane probably just controls it from the outside, kicks him in the body a bunch. He's a decent switch hitter. He has a good jab mechanically. As I said, he doesn't really build on anything. He just kind of does things, which is fine at heavyweight. But I think he's aware enough of the distance that he keeps, and he's defensively, like, he has eyes well enough that he can avoid a lot of what Lewis does early. And Lewis, he's athletically very good, but he's not impenetrable. His gas tank has been liable a couple of times. He's reasonably durable to the head, not so to the body, which Gane is. He hits the body more than the heavyweight average of no times at all. So I think it should be an easy fight for Gane in concept. In execution, I think he's going to let Lewis hang around for maybe a bit too long to make it as clean as it should be. I think he loses to Ngannou pretty convincingly, honestly, just because Ngannou seems to have a lot more intelligence about the way that he enforces his style these days. But then Lewis, that is, like, if you only need to land once, I'd rather see someone do it the Ngannou way than the Lewis way. But he has upside, definitely. As a heavyweight, he's very good. I just don't think he's like the sort of genre-defining, I am the next Stipe Miocic type heavyweight.
Yeah. It looks clean. It looks pretty. A lot of what he does, some of it doesn't. But yeah, I mean, just the ability to like control entries and jab and keep people on the end of strikes. And honestly, a lot of it comes down to controlling entries. He's just pretty smooth with picking his spots to come in, and has some decent setups for landing power shots, but not as much as just kind of landing on the lead and jousting with people. But yeah, I mean, I like watching him fine. I do wish, like you said, with Leon Edwards, I wish he pushed his advantages more. But at heavyweight, that is a situation where it does make sense to be less risk-taking. But it's like such a gamble with Derrick Lewis. Is like, do you not take risks and try to play it safe and let him hang around longer? Or do you take what's given to you and try to hurt him and really take away his power or finish him? You know what I mean? And then put yourself in danger. Because, I mean, unlike other fighters, he doesn't need to be in any sort of good position or need to land an actual good shot, like, to hurt you. He'll throw from anywhere. Like, he just does not care about being good at all. And he's very aware of that. Like, that's what he talks about. So it's like, yeah, he's interesting. Just as like a person to study for, here's how you can be successful without being as skilled as people think you would have to be. But in terms of like people he's beat, they all made like horrendous mistakes. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I don't think he's beaten anybody like that who was impressing me. I'm like, wow, he really, got through their defense by being ridiculous. It's like Volkov really messed up because Volkov was destroying him before that. And it was, I mean, geez, couldn't have picked a worse strike to throw at him. I'm trying to think. I'm not going to rehash Derrick Lewis's whole career, but you know what I mean? It's just like, I don't think he's going to do that to Ngannou. I know their first fight was the worst thing that's ever happened, but I think Ngannou is feeling himself enough now just to throw punches normally. And Derrick Lewis's defense is really, it's not
a thing.
It doesn't exist. So yeah, I really don't want to see him in that position because it's just like, okay, like either he's going to get blown out of the water by Ngannou, which, okay, I guess I could get down for that. Or they're going to have the worst fight of all time again. Tied for, or maybe they'll improve on it slightly, like make it worse. Selling that is going to be ridiculous because they're going to have to basically pretend the first one didn't happen, which is going to be really funny to watch. So I think a lot of people are rooting for this to happen for the memes. I propose that MMA has enough memes, that it's overflowing with memes, and there aren't enough good fighters having good results. And so maybe we should lean toward wanting that. but I'm not going to tell you how to be a fan. Except when it comes to Kevin Holland. I'm going to tell you what to think about Kevin Holland. But in this case,
that's a good idea.
I'll let you think what you want about Derrick Lewis.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in the position where I feel like Ngannou probably beats both at this point, so it's hard to like care a ton, especially when it's. Let me put it a different way. The way that this fight was created, I kind of want it to be awful, just because I want the UFC to be punished for the way that they've kind of tried to screw Ngannou over.
Hey man, you're going to be commentating it, not me, so I'm fine if it's horrible.
That's true. Like I'm on record for wanting this out of several fights, and like Masvidal Usman 2 was another one where like this fight makes absolutely zero sense. I hope the UFC gets literally nothing out of it, and that's kind of where I am right now. But if it's awful, I think it ends. Yeah, I mean, towards only the UFC. I wish good things generally on both of these fighters. I think Derrick Lewis has done enough to like mitigate being bad in a sense, with like just being kind of clever and his attributes being monstrous.
Self-awareness is the smartest quality.
Exactly. Like he knows where he's very weak, and he knows that he doesn't really have the time in his career to get better at those things. So he just figure out like these really weird, janky workarounds. I think Blades really impressed me against Lewis, for instance. He did a lot of very sharp things. I think he like went in and out with the jab and kicked him on exits and a lot of stuff that you'd expect like a good fighter to do against Derrick Lewis. And then he just shot into an uppercut and died instantly.
Yeah.
So that was really sad. You can go back and listen to the commentary for that. We were both incredibly sad about that. But that's the sort of thing with Lewis, right? If you let him hang around for long enough, something weird and stupid is going to happen. As I said, I'm probably going to have to pick Gane here. As for what I hope to happen, I'm not really sure. I'm really not sure. I think there's a decent chance Gane just gets Rosenstriked. Like, that's a decent chance with anyone with Ngannou. And then you end up that it's like, Gane was the next standard bearer for good heavyweights, and now it turns out Ngannou was like the best fighter of all time. But I'd find it funny if Lewis and Ngannou 2 happen exactly the same way. It'd be sad for heavyweight in general, because it'd be sadder for Ngannou, really, because he looked like a better fighter. But I don't know. If Lewis just brings those sorts of fights out of people, who am I to complain? Whatever.
More and more, I find myself needing to treat heavyweight like it's like an entirely different sport. Just view it differently than I view the rest of the divisions, and just be okay with it. I like it better than light heavyweight, because at least it's like dynamic enough that it's interesting. Whereas light heavyweight, it's like, they aren't as good as the people at the other weights, and like stuff doesn't really happen that often. But the Jan era has been decent so far. I mean, it's been very short, but just like the post Jones with like Thiago Santos and Jan and like all that, like this new dynamic is fine. I'm fine with it. The co-main event is the best fight in the card. But you know what? I don't wish for it to be the main event, because then it would be 5 rounds, and then it would be like, oh my God, what are we doing? Don't do this. Never do this. It's Jose Aldo versus Pedro Munhoz. I'll let you lead off the analysis, but I would just like to discuss that Jose Aldo is obviously regarded by most people associated with the Fight Site as the greatest fighter of all time, based on the strength of his resume. He took out over a dozen fighters we consider very high quality, and some of them were very, very high quality, and he just looked amazing while doing it. And no one else has really matched that, where they had the same level of competition and reigned for as long as they did. And the crazy thing is, like, he was already had a good argument for it when he was at featherweight, and he had this history of really bad weight cuts at featherweight. And you're like, okay, like his career is ticking clock, you know what I mean? Like, there's no way he's gonna go much longer because of this. It's like his body looks like it's breaking down. He's getting all these injuries. He can't kick anymore. Like, this is like, he's not gonna last much longer. And then he says, I'm dropping to bantamweight. And we're like, that is the most insane idea of all time. Like, you can't make featherweight comfortably. What are you doing? And he hires like a nutritionist. First of all, the human body is wacky that he mostly lost muscle, because there's no way he had fat to cut. I mean, he's always been super duper shredded. So he lost muscle, but I guess he just did it in a way where he could retain a lot of strength and athleticism. I assume he approached it pretty scientifically. And he lost the amount of weight he needed to make bantamweight comfortably, and he's a bantamweight now, and he like looks like one, and like, what is going on? And his cardio is pretty much the same as it was at featherweight. Like, against Volkanovski, he essentially had enough cardio to do things for 7-8 minutes. Less than that, probably. His cardio is actually better bantamweight than it was at the end.
Based on the Jan fight, for sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, his best round in the Jan fight was the third round. And then he died. But he was having a good performance. So it's just like, he's a legend. He's so amazing. Like, who does that? Who's had the kind of career he's had where he comes to bantamweight, and it's like, not only is he like looking good against, elite bantamweights, he's beaten some of them. It's just, and I mean, after he lost the title at featherweight, he was beating some high ranked featherweights as well. They haven't aged great. Like with Moicano and Stevens, people don't regard them as highly as they did when he beat them. Stevens, you should never have regarded that highly, but just the fact that he's beating these guys, like holding off young contenders, it's pretty incredible. And if he beats Munoz, that's just going to blow my mind, because
Same.
That's just like, well, how are you doing this? He's 17 years into his pro career. So people look at his age and like, oh, he's only 34. First of all, only 34. That's old. 17 years into his pro career. That's how you measure a fighter's, how many miles they have on them, right? And the amount of wars and damage taken and the weight cuts and the way that like Nova and Yao ran as a camp, like everything. And it's like, how is this possible? So he's a superhuman freak, man. It's insane. But do you think he can beat Pedro Munhoz?
I think it's possible. I have a lot of reservations on Jose Aldo that I've picked against him in, I think, all 3 fights so far at bantamweight.
Nice.
I don't know what I said for Cheeto, but I've been right more than I've been wrong technically. I haven't rewatched the Marias fight to see if Aldo actually won. I thought he did live, but I'm also very biased.
I did bad calls in that fight earlier today.
Nice.
And I scored it for Marias, and I didn't think it was that controversial. No, I thought he won the first and third round. You could finagle an argument for Aldo, but I didn't think it was actually that close.
I mean, I remember being very sad about that fight just because Aldo also kind of stopped doing things by round 3. Mm-hmm. He had a very, very strong second round, but the first round was kind of lost after that head kick and the lat drop.
It's funny. He was actually trying decently hard in the third round. He just couldn't pursue as aggressively as he wanted to, and Marias was actually giving him issues in the back foot. It was weird. Marias actually counter jabbed him pretty well in the third round. But yeah, first round he did basically nothing. Second round he looked great, and then third round he actually got kind of frustrated with Marias on the back foot. So it was actually a pretty cool performance from Marias, but a weird one from Aldo. I feel like he hadn't figured out his pacing or being a bantamweight as much yet. It's a lot different than he looks physically than the Yan fight. So I think he's grown into the weight, to a weird way to say that, but you know what I mean? I think he's gotten better at being a bantamweight over time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I've picked against him in all 3 fights, and I've been right more than I've been wrong at this point. Mm-hmm. But the fact, I still don't feel comfortable doing it, just because I feel very confident that Pedro Munhoz is the sort of matchup that Aldo would look absolutely tremendous in his prime against Pedro Munhoz. I don't think it'd be a particularly competitive fight whatsoever. Even if we took like Aldo skill set, cut him down to bantamweight where he's less muscular, maybe even has a bit of a cardio cost. In 3 rounds, I don't think Munhoz would deal any sort of trouble to him. Munhoz, for his part, he's very good. I like Pedro Munhoz a lot. He probably should be in the top 5 already. He's ranked underneath Cody Garbrandt and Rob Font, both of whom he finished in the round.
Because he didn't get the Edgar decision. That's what bumped him down.
Yeah. I rewatched that today. That was a bad decision. I thought it was like 3-2 Munhoz at worst, and the swing round was like, I think it was the 5th round where Edgar seemed to kind of hurt him on one foot with the right hand, but it didn't really, I'm pretty sure Munhoz won the fight. So it's just a real shame because Edgar, as it turned out, didn't really give an elite that much trouble whatsoever. But yeah, Munhoz, he's very good. And his game, I think it's pretty uniquely troubling for a fighter like Aldo in terms of where he is now. In terms of where he used to be, I think a fairly plodding, high-guardy fighter who relies a lot on kicks, that's the sort that Aldo would shut down pretty much entirely. I think Munhoz, he's decent enough that he would, and committed enough to the things that he does, that he'd probably get himself finished really in 4th or 5th round by Aldo, who'd go really hard to his body and start carving the high guard up and defending the kicks without really much trouble. Munhoz, as a kicker, he's a very hard kicker. I wouldn't call him a particularly clever kicker. He had some moments against both Edgar and Rivera where he would, in the 5th round, I think, he started cutting off Edgar's exits with the round kicks and switch kicking. And against Rivera, he started countering his entries with the kicks and stuff. But most of the time, he just blasts these outside low kicks, and Aldo has zero trouble with that ever. So this should not be a troubling fight for Aldo. And I think for the first round and a half here, it won't be. We've seen a lot of points where Aldo could, even against Chito Vera, who has he has some similar upside to Munoz. If you think about it, he's like a stretched out version who's not as good at several things, where he's completely indestructible. He pushes a crazy pace. He has a fairly porous high guard, and he hits reasonably hard. So the athletic traits are kind of there. It's just that Chito being longer and being more willing to concede the back foot is what might have sunk him there. The back foot thing, not the longer thing.
Yeah.
But I think Aldo settling into a bit of a pressurier role here is bad for several reasons. But against Munoz, it could be really bad because Munoz is not the sort to concede the back foot to anyone ever for any reason. At least in terms of like he backed up when the guys like Edgar and Rivera came at him. He doesn't like stand there and counter, just not ever backing up. But in terms of the overall dynamic of the fight, Munoz is always the one moving forward. He's durable enough to afford it. He's definitely conditioned enough to afford it. And in 3 rounds, he's both to just the nth degree. There is no way to hurt this man or back him off. And that in itself makes it very concerning for Jose Aldo. Now, rewatching the Edgar fight, I think I kind of underplayed in the preview that I wrote for the staff picks, which I might have to amend now. But Munoz is actually a lot jabbier than I thought. He did a lot of good work with it against Edgar. 1 is a standalone strike, and 2 to try to draw out those counter combos where you draw them out and counter with the right hand, or draw them out and even kick him at the end of it, which is really smart. But I do not trust Jose Aldo against like fast straight punchers at this point. Munoz is not someone I consider fast in general, but the way that he can kind of play with the rhythm of the jab and kind of use it for different purposes, I'm not sure about this one. And I think if Pedro Munhoz is the sort of fighter I think he is, and he loses the first 2 rounds even with the tools that he has, where he's able to just seriously push Aldo back and still gets carved up, the more Aldo does in the first round and a half, the worse it's going to be for him late. And the worse it is for Munhoz, the harder he's going to push. So yeah, I'm pessimistic for Aldo, but I'm hoping he can get it done. I don't think it's the same sort of fight as the Edgar fight where Munoz is just chasing after him. I think Aldo's going to plant and throw with him and force him to like consider the way that he's entering. But after a point, I think Munoz just gets after it.
Yeah, I agree. Like Aldo's super hard to kick. I think he'll be able to counter Munoz really well, especially with the speed discrepancy. With him like taking the front foot and walking people down more, he started doing that as soon as he dropped the bantamweight. Was doing it to Moraes. It's honestly, it's a less energy intensive style than the way he holds center and counters, just because to enforce that, you got to jab hard and you got to counter hard and you got to, slip and pivot and you got to do a lot of like pretty sharp maneuvers. You can actually
reflex heavy things.
Yeah, exactly. Reflex heavy, which is something that goes with age. Whereas on the front foot, you kind of control when things happen a little bit more. He definitely wasn't used to it very much against Moraes. Like he was having trouble with it, but I mean, overall, he looked good at it, and he really ramped up his body punching too, because it's a safer lead. That's the thing is like Munoz probably isn't going to wear that damage. He probably won't slow down very much, and it won't look like it's hurting him. I don't think he's going to hurt him very much to the body, or to the chin probably. It's going to be really hard to hurt him. And Aldo's a pretty big puncher, but a lot of it's like he punches really hard, not like he has heavy hands. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the Moraes fight, he didn't look like he had a lot of steam left on his arms. But yeah, that's the thing. Is like, I agree. I think it's a good matchup for him as long as he has energy to do things. And then once he kind of drops off a little bit, it's gonna be like Munoz is gonna keep coming, and things could snowball really quickly. How I'm not sure, because I don't think his kick defense will become porous once he gets tired. It's really just his boxing that becomes more vulnerable. Like you can get him to move his head and he can get stuck in a reaction. Basically what Holloway did to him. Munoz isn't that kind of boxer, but he's going to be aggressive. He's going to push his advantage regardless, even if it's not the prettiest way to do it. And I think he'll find success. I'd be really surprised if he didn't win the 3rd round. I don't think he'll finish Aldo. It doesn't seem the way this matchup is. Like Aldo's chin is still good, and he doesn't fall apart entirely.
He doesn't stop trying.
He just kind of stops doing stuff. But he's defensively, he's still all right, but he's kind of loses the energy to still have output, which is tough because like in the Chito Vera fight, Chito started to gain some momentum at the end of the 2nd round, and Aldo just opened the 3rd round by grappling and took his back and hung out on his back the entire round. That's not really an option here. Munoz is, I'd rank him pretty high all time. as in terms of MMA wrestlers. Maybe not offensively as much. He's good. He's good offensively, but defensively, he's one of the best the UFC's ever had. And I think a lot of it is, one, he's good, but two, people don't want to hang out in his hips too long if they didn't take a really clean, good shot, because he'll guillotine you. Yeah. So depending on how you try to take him down, like, maybe you can wrestle up to the back, but still, it's like Munoz isn't going to be held there like Chito. So the grappling probably won't be there to bail him out. I don't think Munoz is going to try to wrestle with him or grapple with him too much. But yeah, it's going to be a weird fight because depending on how Aldo approaches his pacing, because like we said in the Moraes fight, he kind of took the first round off in order to do more later. And that's not what he did against Jan, but it is kind of similar where he did definitely paced out.
First round slipped away, yeah.
Paced out his action, made sure he would have left something for later. But yeah, like the pacing, the cardio, the conditioning factor, that seemed like the whole matchup to me, honestly, because if that wasn't a thing, I'd be very confident picking him. But now it's just like a gamble. It's like, okay, how much will he win before he starts losing? And when will that happen? And how much will it matter? And that's obviously a question for a lot of matchups, but it really feels like what the dynamic is. So in the staff picks, I picked Aldo. I think it's not unreasonable to expect him to be able to win 2 rounds and live and not get 10-8 in the third. But yeah, it's totally up in the air. I mean, Munoz is really going to have some output, and it's going to force Aldo to do things unless he wants to lose the rounds. And I'm not sure if he's in a position where he can afford to lose the first round. He can't really hang on to have something for the third. So it's going to be really interesting. The only thing that would disappoint me really is if it ended in the first, because then we didn't get to see the way this would play out. But yeah, I mean, it kind of feels like an awesome, amazing fight that's going to have a lot of really cool moments from both guys, and it's the main event for me.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think another thing is that Munoz is also probably kind of a decline risk just because he's been fighting since like 2009.
That's a point.
He's had a bunch of like really nasty fights.
He looks really good against Rivera, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, that's true. Like, I think it's the sort of thing where if any part of his game kind of goes down, it's a lot less resistant than Aldo's to decline. He needs like all of his urgency and all of his cardio and especially all of his durability to really be able to do a ton. And Assunção was a nasty fight. Both Rivera fights, he took a decent amount of damage. Sterling and Edgar were both pretty nasty for him. So, I mean, for both guys, really, but also for him. So I wouldn't be completely surprised if he suddenly showed up looking old. But I just, with the way that we saw Munoz fight last time and with the way that he approached the Edgar fight, it's really hard for me to, like, trust Aldo the way that I want to. I think Aldo still seems urgent at defending kicks. I think Aldo still seems urgent at defending and countering the jab like he did against Cheeto with like the very first jab he threw. But when the fight gets a little bit deeper, he's still, you mentioned his kick defense doesn't really get worse. It didn't against Cheeto. He like threw to the beginning of the third round, like the first exchange of the third round was him like checking a leg kick and countering with an overhand. And he's never really stopping, like trying to keep defensively moving. It's just, Munoz is a really big hitter. He understands how to set up his offense really well. He's heavy-handed. I think he has a really underrated ability to like track guys' exits. He did that against Font a bunch. He did that against Edgar a good deal. And I think if Aldo gets a decent amount less efficient, it's going to be a lot trickier for him to survive. I don't think Munoz is the sort of boxer that really troubles him the way that someone like Peter Yan did, where he starts drowning in layers, or even someone who just like reaches out and hits him for free a bunch of times at range. Munoz is not that kind of boxer. He's a lot more of a hooking blitzer, which is really good for Aldo in terms of defense. He can just like slip and pivot out and make Munoz look like a moron. And he's going to do that a good deal in the first couple rounds, I think. But as I said, the more he has to do early, and he's going to get a lot of opportunities to do things early and a lot of necessity to do things early against someone who pressures that hard, the worse he's going to look late. And I think Munoz is going to make him look way too good early to survive late.
Interesting. Are we both picking Aldo?
I'm picking Munoz. I'm very sad about it.
Okay. I wasn't sure where you're going with that. All right. Well, I think it's reasonable to pick either way. Just depending on your rationale. The rationale is reasonable. I'm cool with it.
My rationale is sadness hedging.
That's always a safe move. You got to do it in a smart way. You can't just say he'll win unless he doesn't. You got to say exactly how it's going to go down. Anyway, welterweight, something of a number one contender fight, or a setup for a number one contender fight at the very least. Michael Chiesa versus Vicente Luque. We've been hard on Chiesa, but I think he's defined himself now as, hear me out, a Maya type, in that he has, like I said about Derrick Lewis, dumbed down his game to focus on his strengths and kind of simplify things. I think there was a time where he was trying to get better as a striker and was doing a lot of ugly stuff to get to his wrestling grappling situations. I think he's accepted that his striking is butt ugly, and that he just wants to use it to tie up and to start grappling as soon as possible. I mean, he's even bigger than, obviously, he's bigger than he's ever been, at welterweight. But I mean, his size advantage feels more pronounced at welterweight so far. Like, he seems very strong, and it's really helping out his game, like having that strength of his full size. So he's only going to get bigger and fill out more. I think it's good weight for him. I like the way he grapples. I like the way he wrestles. I like all that. And he seems like a cool guy too. Ben interviewed him, still hasn't released it. What a loser. But I like Chiesa, and he's Italian, so obviously I support. But I like Luque way more as a fighter. Pretty solid counter puncher. Has tools on the outside, can kick people up. Good counter grappler. Kind of like, this is gonna be weird. Similar to a Rockhold archetype, where he's like has some holes defensively on his feet, but like pretty dangerous offensively. And if you try to grapple with him, he can take you out. But Rockhold, had the ridiculously good top game, which is different, and his boxing is much worse than Luque's. But yeah, I mean, I like Luque, and I just have a vision of him cross countering Chiesa a lot. We're just going to have to see how the durability and gym hold up, honestly. Luque does hit the body, but Chiesa appears to just be able to tank those. But I do think chewing up the leg on the outside is going to be good. I think chewing up the leg and countering any of Chiesa's leads. I think, giving Chiesa the responsibility of leading is going to be smart. Because he's going to be able to react. If you lead to his head, he'll be able to react, and he'll be able to create a clinch situation. But if you wait on him, he's gonna have to throw something long to get near you, and that's very counterable. So unless he suddenly develops like a really good kicking game, I think he's gonna have to lead. And this is exactly what I said about the AJ McKee fight last week, is that he's gonna have to do this. But I don't think we're gonna see that kind of adaptation from Chiesa. So I think it's totally possible that he can get him down and have some success top gaming him, but I don't think he's gonna like run away with it doing that. I think Luque is a pretty competent grappler. So yeah, I'm excited for it. I do hope Luque can get it done, because people really in our circle have been really down on him. Since when? I don't know.
Since Wonder Boy, probably.
Yeah, he's had some tough fights with people that you wouldn't want him to have tough fights with, like Mike Perry. That was Mike Perry's best performance ever, really. So it says more about Mike Perry than does Luque, in my opinion. But Wonder Boy fight, he kind of let that get away from him. I think that was winnable. But yeah, I like his style a lot. I think he matches up well with everybody. I think he's a cool fight for anybody. And I want to see him fighting top contenders and fighting for titles. I don't really want to see Chiesa doing it as much. Because we already have like a guy near the top who's got that gimmick. You know what I mean? Of just being able to clinch and wrestle and grapple everybody. Let's get some cool strikers up there, because it's like a very grappler who can strike division right now.
It's the opposite of lightweight.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how I feel. Did you have any different reads on that matchup?
Not really. I'm not sure how much we've seen of Luque in the clinch aside from against Edwards, and Edwards is a very, very different clincher to Michael Chiesa. I think the front choke threat is probably going to keep Chiesa from taking like really bad shots to get to grappling positions, because Luque, he has been front choked before by Jorge Masvidal of all people, which is something. But yeah, I think Luque is good enough in those sorts of positions that he can keep Chiesa from grappling recklessly, if that makes sense. It's not a sort of situation where he just needs to touch him and Luque is sucked into a position and he's in a bad position from the get-go. The way, for instance, Neil Magny, he never really had any sort of threat from those positions. He could just sort of compete and lose. Where Vicente Luque, he poses a threat, which means that Chiesa probably needs to set up his entries a little bit better than he usually does. And that definitely opens him up for the counterpunching. Chiesa, in terms of the striking, I'm still not a huge fan. He does a lot of squared up circling on the outside. He's super inefficient, which is an issue because he seemed to I don't know if I'd say gassed out because he was just in a 5-rounder, right, against Neil Magny. And
with minimal resistance.
exactly. Like he looked gassed. He didn't fight like he was super gassed, but also like Neil Magny, he's really only a thing in the places where Chiesa is most comfortable. So it's really tough for Neil Magny to take advantage of Chiesa being gassed. So if he was gassed, there's really no way to tell by his fighting. He just looked like he was having a fairly rough time later. And it makes sense, right? Like unless you have a really good gas tank, if you're huge and you circle around the outside for the whole time, it's going to be rough on you.
Yeah.
So I think Luque has some real upside here. It just really depends on how good his clinch wrestling is, and I don't really know if I've seen that enough. But I'm going to trust him here. I think Luque probably beats him up enough that he'll get a read on the way that Chiesa enters and start beating him up. So hopefully Luque by TKO, maybe a club and sub. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I mean, Pettis did it, so it's possible. Yeah, I'm excited for this one actually because if Chiesa wins, then good for him, and if Luque wins, that's what I wanted. So it's a win-win. Luque has been a hoofed guy for most of his career at this level, but I don't know if he's there right now. I haven't seen him in any of the footage. I think someone told me he's been training in Brazil, but I trust him. We'll see. Cool.
I mean, I trust Hooft more than I trust any individual fighter, to be honest.
I wish he trusted his fighters as much as you trust him. Specifically Rumble.
I don't blame him for not trusting Rumble. Who can trust Rumble?
You got to think there's so much backstory when your coach is saying, don't give up. Like, why?
I mean, it's pretty much all explained by him immediately giving up. Like,
the fact that he thought that was necessary, it's like, okay, this is clearly something that happens. But yeah, sure. I have nothing of substance to say about Song Yadong versus Casey Kenny. Can you say something smart about that?
I can say smart things about Casey Kenny, a little bit less so about Song Yadong. I don't really. We watched at least one Song Yadong fight together.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fight that he probably should have lost, so it's tough to say. But Song Yadong looks like a decent puncher, solid in combination. He has at least one really clean counter KO on Alejandro Perez, who is returning against Johnny Eduardo in a fight between two people who are somehow I didn't know they were still alive. It's shocking to me, but. Yeah, it was a clean KO, so he seems to be reasonably potent on the counter if you're lazy with your kicks. Casey Kenny, I was pretty excited for him before the Dominic Cruz fight. I think I probably still should be pretty excited for him. Cruz is a pretty unique challenge that you're probably not going to face again. But yeah, he's a fun southpaw, lots of round kicky, straighty things. Really good counterpuncher. I think if we're doing Rockhold comparisons, he's a southpaw round kicker who likes the counter right hook. So there's something.
We are doing Rockhold comparisons.
The Rockhold episode. But yeah, he's a lot of fun. I mean, he's definitely more comfortable than Rockhold in those sorts of engagements. Decent puncher. The Alateng Haile fight was probably the most impressive one. He beat the crap out of that guy. It was so ugly. It was ugly in the best way. But yeah, I think I trust him here to beat up Song Yadong. I don't really know if I've seen Song Yadong against a competent southpaw, which is one thing. He's going to get kicked a lot, and I don't know. I don't have smart things to say about the matchup, just about Casey Kenny.
That's fine.
I like him a lot, so
That's
maybe
fine.
there'd be wrestling and stuff. Kenny seems like a competent grappler, and
his
Song
base is
Yadong
judo.
and he got laid on by Cody Stamen in the third round, so that'll maybe be a thing.
Yeah, I forgot we watched that fight, but I have nothing new to add, so that's cool. The neatest fight on the card, the fight that makes me go neat, is Bobby Green versus Raphael. I was ready to correct myself. I thought I was going to Portuguese his name and say Raphael, but I didn't. But now I'm talking about it anyway. Raphael Fiziev, someone I'm really excited about. I've been excited about since before his UFC debut, and then I was punished by the universe with the Mustafayev fight. But now he's back, and everyone's hype on him. He's a outside the top 15 type of contender. So I hope he gets in there. I think if he can continue on his trajectory, I mean, he's got really heavy hips. He's been at good wrestling gyms so far. I mean, Tiger Muay Thai and Henry Hoof, those are two gyms I really trust to turn strikers into competent wrestlers. And I've seen him training, and he stuffed Moicano really well and didn't look like he had a problem with that at all. So I trust him on the feet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think, energy management is a theme for him. He needs to be a little more careful. Like with Mark Chikadze, that's a fight that people point to where like he kind of slowed down in the third round and wasn't doing as well after that. Also, the Alex White fight was kind of bad for him.
It was weird.
It was really messy. But he's getting into his groove. He's picking his spots a little better. And with Chiesa, like it's reasonable for him to not have expected Chiesa to not die from everything that he was hitting him with. That was really weird. But yeah, I mean, I like him a lot. I've read about him a couple times in various locations and forms. And Bobby Green is just, I think he's what the Diaz brothers think they are.
That's a great way to put it, actually. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Bobby Green seems to have become a very competent defensive fighter based entirely on Floyd Mayweather's B-roll. It's incredibly impressive to me in the weirdest way. But yeah, Bobby Green, he tends to be the sort of fighter he's very reliable to be A, durable and B, conditioned. And I think it's the sort of thing where if Fiziev has fixed the issues that he showed against Alex White and Mark Chiesa, this is the sort of stage where he's going to show it, right? Someone who's janky defensively, someone who's not particularly threatening to him in the pocket, I don't think. Someone who he can probably kick a bunch. I don't know how often we've seen Bobby Green against dedicated kickers, but his stance doesn't seem to be super helpful towards it. I'm not particularly sure.
I think like the Diaz brothers, he can be kind of lackadaisical when it comes to kick defense sometimes. But I think when he actually is like, okay, you're going to be kicking me this much, he can actually like shift and have better defense and take things more seriously. He's a weird fighter. He'll show you a lot of different versions of himself within a single fight.
Yeah, that makes sense. He's a very young veteran sort of fighter where I don't know how young he is.
I think he's in his 30s.
So youngish
just a veteran.
Yeah. But yeah, he's reasonably adaptable. We've seen him do clever things in a lot of his fights. That's why pretty much every fight he's been in tends to be like a controversial split decision.
Yeah, he's 34.
Very weird. Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's old for bantamweight. For lightweight, it's old.
He's had 40 fights.
That's kind of the definition of a veteran who's not super old, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think Bobby Green is the sort if he doesn't die instantly, because he is getting older and he is gaining mileage. He did nearly die to the hands of Lando Venata in the first fight, which is something pretty concerning because Venata is like a completely unstructured offensive fighter and physique hits awesome. Very hard.
And that's worth something.
I mean, he did win the rematch very convincingly, which is cool. Yeah, I mean, if he can hold up against Fiziev in the first and second round, I expect him to have a strong third round. But I don't know. I think he might not just be durable enough, and Fiziev is good enough at like hitting people very hard in the pocket and kicking them very hard in the body. I don't know. Like we've seen, like for as much as we praise Bobby Green just being there for a lot of his fights, he did get knocked out by Dustin Poirier at least once. He is knockoutable, and the older you get, the rougher that gets on you. So yeah. I hope he does well. I liked seeing Bobby Green do well because he's been robbed enough. I thought the Drakkar Close fight was a complete robbery. There's at least one other fight I think was a robbery.
Yeah, Thiago Moises maybe. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I thought he lost to Trinaldo, but that's because I'm biased towards Trinaldo, so there's something. Yeah, I want to see him do well, but Fiziev seems like a bad opponent for pretty much anybody at this point.
Yeah. And Green, maybe more than he wants to be, perhaps, is an all-rounder. He can do pretty much everything competently. He is a wrestler, which is funny. Like he plays to Cali States in high school, obviously, but that's a good base. It's one of the best states in the country for wrestling. So that is his base. So he has retained a decent amount of that. I've seen him wrestle in plenty of fights, like the Clay Guida fight actually recently. I mean, Say what you will about Clay Guida historically and recently, but if you have gaps in that regard, you will lose to him. It's kind of similar to what Darren Elkins is doing these days. You know what I mean? It's like if you aren't ready to wrestle and grapple with him the entire time, and you're not so good on bottom, or you're not so good at defensive wrestling, he'll get you. I mean, Clay Guida recently beat Michael Johnson, and Michael Johnson's like been having competitive fights with decent people recently, and he lost to Clay Guida. So Clay Guida is kind of a punchline usually, but I think it actually does mean something that he was able to not be a good anti-wrestler at all, but have all these exchanges with him and come out on top of them. So that's not really going to help him here because Fiziev is probably not going to shoot on him. He's going to have to be a better striker or just an opportunistic one, because I think he can challenge Fiziev in terms of like finding holes in his boxing fundamentals, because Fiziev is a very athletic puncher. And yeah, I mean, he can box decently, but I would say Green's the better boxer. But I think physicality, athleticism is going to play a huge factor in this matchup. And that's all in all directions except cardio in Fizie's favor. And I mean, if Green does want to try to initiate wrestling and grappling, even if he's more skilled in those areas, I think just physically he's going to have a hard time imposing himself on this dude who's super bricked up and stocky. And yeah, I mean, he kicks super hard. He's a bundle right now. He's coiled up. And I think just let him loose in the division. Let's see what happens. He's got to get past Green for me, just for this division to be more interesting, because Green's days are numbered, even as like an interesting veteran guy. But yes, I'm definitely picking Fiziev, and I'm really excited to see how far he goes, because imagine if he like really gets his stuff together and all the things we like about his game persist. And he ends up like towards that top 5, and he's an elite guy with the kind of style he has. I mean, that's a person you want to have around for sure, especially with how grappler intensive this division is getting. You need more strikers that don't make me mad, and more good kickers. It's like, where are the kickers? So yeah, that's one of the best fights in the card as well. And I think that's the only other one I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I don't see anything else on this card really. But yeah, I mean, Fiziev should be a lot of fun. I mean, there are a couple of prospects at lightweight that I expect to go reasonably far if they shore up like one big flaw in their game. For Fiziev, it's not really a big flaw as much as he doesn't do as much as he should later. And that's something that, all things considered, it's not as big a flaw as someone like Damir Ismagulov not just being a great athlete overall, if that makes sense. Like, I expect Ismagulov to go for far too, but Fiziev is someone who you can really see the potential in how he knocked out someone like Moicano, for instance. Moicano is a tough guy to get in on in that fashion, and Fiziev just kind of nuked him. So, yeah, I'm hoping he does well. Green, as I mentioned, he's a sort of test to really show how much Fiziev is shored those issues up more than anything else. Like, a lot of the people I've been talking to, like, they're more betting oriented. They're like, Green's a plus 300. I'm like, okay, Green probably looks narrower than a plus 300 in my opinion, but you're going to be very frustrated when he loses the fight. He's going to lose, but like, if you're willing to take that moral victory, I'm fine with that, because it's going to be a moral victory for you.
Is betting a game of moral victories?
Sometimes, surprisingly often. It's going to be like, hey, I had the value on Bobby Green at plus 300 because he only looked like a plus 150. Well, a plus 150 still means that he lost. Yeah. So
I don't speak that language. Yeah, I'm looking forward to not watching this card live and having to catch up with it later. So I'm going camping this weekend. Sriram's going to do the commentary either by himself or with Tumen or with somebody. I don't know what that's going to be, but hopefully there's going to be commentary on at least the top 2 fights, and maybe that one. That'd be a cool one to do as well. And you won't have to deal with some black screen nonsense from Showtime. The jerks don't want me pirating their videos.
Pathetic.
But yeah, hopefully soon we can get to some Patreon requests to discuss some different various topics. There's a lot of stuff I wanted to talk about other than just constant fight coverage, but I feel like these are fights that need to be discussed. So
yeah, there
you have it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think there's a whole lot else to talk about. What's the next card? I have no idea.
I don't even know. Let's not worry about it.
The summer's been kind of sickly and pathetic this time because they
and the fights
blew
too.
their load in the spring.
Just kidding. It's been fine. I'm fine. We're all fine. Yeah. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, but the point is there's going to be some off weeks for us to handle your broader, bigger, more fun topics. So stay tuned.
The end.